Gokigenyo homies, Wade Willis here for my playthrough of Umineko. This is episode 5 and part 2. The first part is pretty short. But yeah, we have like a new character. Battler left the game, came back. The whole thing was essentially solved, and it looks like now we're rewinding to see what the hell happened because he let Burn Castell and Lambda Delta kind of run the show. So I'm really excited to see where we go from here. And yeah, guys, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, jump on the Wade train. Yeah, trying to get to 3,000 subscribers. Please help me reach that goal. After sighing deeply, Nanjo left the side of the bed. On the bed, Kinza could be seen lying down asleep. Interesting. So Kinzo's dead. Alright, chill out, homegirl. Sobbing, Natsui slumped over the chest of that man, who had fallen into a sleep from which he could never awaken. Would never awaken. Okay, I'm gonna check to see if everyone's back alive, actually, because I'm assuming this is a... yeah. Well... huh. Okay, so it doesn't show him as dead, though, which is kind of strange. Someone had told me to look up Battler to see if there's new stuff about his magic. Maybe this side shows kind of the magic. Okay. The man designated to be Beato's opponent in the first 4 games. In the 5th game, he is displeased that Lambda Delta has taken over as Game Master, so he does not participate as player. Okay. Burn. Let's see. Yeah, basically, we see that Burn's goal is to basically destroy Beato, which I like Beato a lot, so that kind of sucks. Interesting, we don't see Maria here at all. Okay. I think this is gonna be like an intense Natsui episode. Now we see that the new character claims that Natsui is the culprit. Now can we have like a similar thing to where there's some madness or disease that is choosing a different person each time, like in Higurashi? That'd be kind of weird if they did the exact same thing. Although logically could make sense. Natsui couldn't stop crying over the death of a man whom she had loved like a second father. Kumasawa rubbed Natsui's back, consoling her. Kraus slumped into his late father's favorite chair. By sitting there, he might have been immersed in the memories of his departed father. Or perhaps he thought that by sitting there, he might be able to understand just a bit of the madness of Kinza's later years, which he had never been able to comprehend before. And Nanjo just as he had when Kinzo once sat in that chair contemplating a chess move, turned his back and looked down over the outside world through a crack in the curtains.
同じ死ぬならせめて寝込んで1年後に死亡とか。
So we don't see that he's actually labeled dead, which I think is suspicious. So is this actually him? Is Nanjo in on this? Is there a double of Kinzo?
それは逆だ。最後の瞬間までお元気だったことを喜ぶべきです。
That's true, because you don't want to like deteriorate.
建前上はそうなるがね。
Nanjo understood that as well. Ushiro Kinzo, who had risen like a comet and glittered like a supernova in the post-war business world, had died. His funeral would probably be a fantastic scale, and would also probably be a ceremony marking Krause's inheritance of the headship. Or will it? He would have to arrange everything as the host of the event, carry out the funeral diplomacy perfectly, and make it clear to all that the Ushiroman family still had an enormous influence in the political and financial spheres. As Nanjo watched Krause, he was vividly reminded of the time when Kinzo had been suddenly selected as the Ushiromi family head. So I didn't know that he's known him that long, when Kinzo had been lost and confused. And this way, he was able to understand Krause's distress and sympathize with it. Natsui's sobs eventually subsided. Watching this and leaving Kumasawa to care for Natsui as a fellow woman, Genji returned to where Krause was. And as though asking what should be done, Genji lowered his head slightly.
手続き等は私と源氏さんでやろう。クラウスさんはまずは親戚の方々に連絡した方がいいでしょうな。
Krause, with his hands over his eyes, didn't respond. Perhaps even he didn't know this day would come. Krause really couldn't hide his shock of how suddenly it had reached him.
私と南條先生にお任せを。旦那様はまずは奥様とご相談いただくのが良いかと思います。
Maybe she heard that, or maybe it was coincidence. As though responding to Genji's words, Natsui came over. Her eyes were red from crying so much, but she apparently understood the heavy responsibility that had been imposed on them even better than Krause did.
これからはあなたが栄光ある後宮家の当主です。
Are you though?
お父様の後を立派に継いだことを内外に示しましょう。この夏日、あなたの妻として棺を並べる日までお仕えする覚悟です。
Natsui's such a ride or die. Trying to encourage her husband, who was overcome with shock, Natsui lent him some reassuring words. When Krause finally lowered the hands that had been covering his face, he looked up at the ceiling with a blank expression and let out a deep, deep sigh.
どうかしっかり。お父様の残したものを食い荒らそうと目論む輩が大勢いるのですよ。私たちはお父様の名誉と財産を守るために戦わなければなります。それが後宮家当主の最初の仕事ですよ。
分かってる。分かっているとも。
南條先生と源氏はお役所や葬儀業者への手配をお願いします。特に源氏、お父様の葬儀にふさわしいものとなるよう特に手配を頼みます。
So did he die the day of the gathering? Like, where is everyone already on the island? Like, what's going on here?
それから南條先生、お父様は病院でお亡くなりになったわけではないので、その。
場合によっては解剖が入るかもしれませんな。
なんとかなりませんか。亡くなったとはいえ、お父様の大切なお体です。傷をつけるなど耐えられることではありません。
Very suspicious.
気持ちはわかる。だがそういうところをきっちりすることも大切だ。それにこう言ってはなんだが、難しい親族の方々が多いんじゃないかね。
Who knew how these vultures after the inheritance might try to find fault with them? They might claim to have found some reason to suspect the cause of the death, using that as a point of contention to start some trouble. Right now is important not only to pay Kinzo's remains as respect that they were due, but also to solidify the position of the new family head, Krause.
わかりました。 必要最小限にお願いします。間違ってもお父様の威厳が損なわれるようなお姿にしないように。
それは大丈夫だ。安心しなさい。とにかく金蔵さんのことはわしらに任せて、夏日さんはクラウスさんのそばにいてあげなさい。これからが大変なんだから。
分かっています。あなたもどうかしっかり。
Kraus was still staring blankly at his ceiling with a befuddled expression on his face. She understood the shock and heavy responsibility he bore. Natsui understood her husband's feelings as much as anyone.
親族への連絡は私今だけは休まれてください。
Kraus didn't respond. Natsui, thinking to be just a little bit unreliable at the moment, decided she must offer her support. Seeing her husband like this actually spurred Natsui to action, and resolute expression rose to her face.
これから忙しくなります。今できることを始めましょう。夫はきっとお父様と二人きりで話したいこともあると思います。私たちは一度ここを退出しましょう。
そうでございますね。その時間はきっと今しか取れないでしょうから。
There's no time to shed tears. If Kraus were ever to be given a time to cry for his dead father, that time would have to be now. Everyone agreed with Kumasawa's words. Even so, Kraus continued to blankly gaze up at the ceiling and didn't respond in any way. Natsui urged the servants to go.
私はジェシカにも話してきます。今やあの子が次期当主です。それにふさわしい自覚を持つようによく言い聞かせなくては。
待て。
As they stared at each other, as they started to make their way out of the city, Kraus finally spoke. They stopped walking.
はい。
待て。
はい。
Hadn't she already stopped walking, just like her husband had asked? But despite that, he told her once again to wait. From those slightly weak words, Natsui understood that he probably stopped her because he wanted her to be by his side.
お前たちは下へ。私は夫と言います。何かあったらここに電話するように。
かしこまりました。だから待てと言っている。
When Kraus suddenly raised his voice, everyone jumped and turned around. Unable to comprehend what she had done to spark her husband's wrath, Natsui ran up to him.
どうしましたあなた。
What the hell?
私は何か失礼なことを口にしてしまいましたか。だったらお許しを。
いや、違う。そうじゃない。そうじゃない。少し待て。時間をくれ。
ええ、わかっています。心を整理するためにも必要です。私たちはその時間をあなたにあげようと、ここから静かに出ていくだけですよ。
だからそれを待てというのだ。いいか、誰もその場から動くな。一歩たりともだ。疲れたなら、椅子にでもソファーにでも好きに座ればいい。だから何も喋らずに静かに黙って、
So does he think
何もせず
someone
に
in
いろ。
this room killed the dad? Those unreasonable words felt like a glimpse into how Kinzo used to be. Natsui couldn't hide her slight surprise at this behavior, which almost made it seem as though Kinzo had possessed her husband. I've thought possession could be a thing throughout this story. Natsui told the servants to wait for the time being. She ordered them to sit on a sofa a short distance off, approached her husband, and spoke to him in a small voice.
あなたがお命じになれば、夏日はいくらでも待ちます。とどまります。ですからどうか、お気を鎮められてください。
違う。そうではないのだ。
Well then what is it,
そうで
dude?
はないのだ。
Use your big boy words. Was it really blood or was he actually being possessed? Kraus' disorderly style of speech strongly resembled Kinzo's. As she watched this, Natsui became certain that Kraus was Kinzo's son after all, and that he was the true successor, more suitable than any other person.
夏日、こっち。
Kraus stood up and headed towards the window, trying to lengthen the distance between himself and the servants, waiting on the sofa by even a small amount. Natsui realized that he must have done must have something secret to discuss.
はい、あなた。何事ですか？
親父に死なれてはまずいのだ。
しかし、もうお亡くなりになりました。そういうわけには参りません。
そうじゃない。今はまずいんだ。
どういうことですか？
親父の財産を担保にしている。相続問題になれば隠しをせない。
担保ですか？いかほど？
メロディーランドの時、近藤君を応援したことがあった。
あの方とは縁を切れと申し上げたじゃありませんか。私には断ったと言ったはず。どうして？
男の義理というものがある。断れなかった。
Crest claimed to hold honor as a virtue. However, Natsui knew that he most often used this as an excuse for when he reluctantly went along with some deal that he just couldn't refuse.
お金に余裕があるならいざ知れず。この島のリゾート計画でかなりの借金をされたのではありませんでしたか？
ああ、したさ。方々で恩人に世話になったんだ。
Oh my god.
それらを返済するためにも座しているわけにはいかない。返済するためには金がいる。金を生むためには金がいる。金がなければ始まらない。この島の計画だって企画会社がおかしなことにならなければ順調だったのだ。都の役人とも連携は取れていた。東京都の新しい観光スポットになると知事の太鼓判ももらえていた。私の根回しは完璧だったのだ。たまたま巡り合わせとタイミングが悪かった。ちょっとした運のすれ違い、事故みたいなものだった。あれは事故なんかではありません。詐欺です。あなたは騙されたのです。初めから彼らはこの島のリゾート計画など描けていなかったのです。そんなことはないぞ。
I'm with Natsui on this. Kraus seems like a more.
土方君のビジョンは先見性にあふれていた。世界と未来に目を向けた広大な視野は私が夢だと信じていたものなど猫の額ほどの広さしかないことを教えてくれた。夢が広がる世界に未来。
Oh my god, this guy.
夏日も一緒に聞いていただろう。
ええ、聞いていました。そしてお帰りになられた後に申し上げたはずです。あの方はうさんくさい。語るのは未来ばかりで地に足がついていない。これ以上お付き合いしてはならないと。
土方君は立派な好青年だ。
I hope we get to meet this guy.
彼の生き様からは学ぶことも多いぞ。
Oh my god.
彼は若いが尊敬できる。彼のことを侮辱することは許さんぞ。
あなたは同じことを月旅行の時にもおっしゃいました。
I wonder.
先見性がある、未来がある、夢があると連呼され、その挙句はいかがでしたか？荒唐無稽な話だったとあなた自らがお認めになったではありませんか。
Hold on. So this guy was going to try to do tourism of the moon, like Earth's moon.
私はNASA の高官とか名乗るおかしな男が現れた頃からこれは絶対におかしいと確信しておりました。
This guy is stupid as hell.
あれはあの外国人が国際的な詐欺師だったに過ぎない。
He fell for moon tourism?
あの件については私も曽根崎氏も被害者だ。
Sonozaki. Huh.
彼の先見性は今をもって間違っていない。将来必ず世界の大富豪が宇宙旅行をたしなむ時代が訪れる。
Yo, we're barely to that now. And it's just the super billionaire, literally the richest people in the world do it. And they made their own company to do it.
そしてその最初の事業は民間 E 社によって独占されるだろう。 着眼点は間違っていない。それを利用して
Oh my gosh.
世界中の投資家を騙している国際的な詐欺集
Guy's
団がい
literally
て
a moron.
曽根崎という男もその一味だったと申し上げているのです。あなたはどこまでお人よしなのですか。どうしていつもうさんくさい話を
This guy
疑いもせ
deserves
ず
to
に乗っ
lose
て
his
しまうのです
fortune.
か。
Oh my god, how did he get Natsui?
訂正しろ。曽根崎氏は優秀な未来ある男だ。うさんくさくなどない。彼の語る夢は未来を先取りしているからこそ、それが見えるものには妄想にしか見えんだけだ。女のお前には
Oh,
未
of
来など
course,
見えん。
yeah.
ええ、女の私には未来など見えません。でも現在なら見えます。私の目の前で狡猾な二枚舌の詐欺師たちに丸め込まれ、騙されてなお妄信している哀れな夫の姿なら見ることができます。
Believe me, I've been swindled before, but not to set up a
黙れ。
moon tourism, and it wasn't all my money.
お前には金持ち業も経済も何もわからん。夫の仕事に口は出すな。妻は家事だけをしてればいい。
Oh my god, this guy.
お前は黙っていろ。
I wouldn't mind if she kills this guy. Without another word, Natsui fell silent just as Cress had hoped she would. She was already far beyond anger and sadness. An emotion that lay on the other side of those was an almost indifferent pity. Krauss, who had been in awe of Kinzo since he was very young, had started to subconsciously admire the way his father lived. Without realizing it, he had come to believe that he could only be recognized as a man of his own right if he surpassed his father. However, Kinzo had been a mad genius, the likes of which had never been seen in the Ushiromiya family's long history. That talent was a gift from heaven, and it definitely wasn't genetic, much less something that could be learned. To give the two of them a chance to talk alone, Natsui told the servants not to tell anyone about Kinzo's death, and they left the room for the time being. Then she invited Krauss to her bedroom and made him tell her everything about the current financial situation. So do they sleep in different rooms? These were things that Natsui had been told about under the assumption that the woman had no business knowing. Natsui had herself made a point of view of avoiding this area in the past, thinking that this wasn't a wife's place to intrude on such matters. Yeah, well, she should have. However, this might also have meant that she had to abandon her duty as a wife to protect her family. The depths of this sin have been made quite clear to Natsui. Krauss was probably tired of trying to defend himself. Perhaps because he had gotten a headache, he hid his face and sank into silence. Natsui noticed that the water in the electric kettle was boiling and stood to refill her cup with black tea. When she touched the cup of black tea, she noticed for the first time. The scent of the cup and the saucer clicking together told her that her fingers were shaking. Krauss had built up a large debt to obtain funds for his various projects and to cover the losses when they failed. Of course, he had put the mansion and property up as collateral. However, doing such a thing above board would result in the mortgage being registered. In other words, there would be a record that Krauss had put Kinzo's wealth up as collateral to obtain a loan without anyone's permission. Kinzo, Ava, and the others must not learn of such a thing. Therefore, Krauss had been putting those assets up as collateral using the worst possible method.
権利書と委任状を預けた。
Yo, my man is straight stupid.
それはどういう意味ですか。
What Krauss was saying probably meant that he had, in essence, signed away the rights to his assets. If these assets had been used as collateral for a loan, then Krauss would still have some leeway under the law. He would have to deal with a bank, which would have absolutely no compassion, but they would be able to work something out with the rules set by society. However, signing away the deed and power of attorney was a whole different story. How did you... In other words, even the mansion they were living in, if the person holding the deed decided to ignore the agreement with Krauss and sell the mansion to a third party right this moment, They would have no recourse whatsoever. Far from using collateral for a loan, this was basically the same as selling the house to borrow money. Good lord, these people. This poor lady.
つまり、後宮家の生殺与奪は、金貸したちの手に委ねられていたわけですね。彼らがほんのわずかの気まぐれを起こして、突然この家を売り払ったら、私たちは今すぐにも荷物をまとめ、出て行かなくてはならないということですね。
理屈上はそうだ。だが、取引の相手はいずれも社会的信用のある人物ばかりだ。サラ金じゃないぞ。経済人同士の信用取引だ。私も相手を信用、相手だって、私に金を貸すことで私が大きな事業を成功させ、投資した額が大きくなって帰ってくることを信用している。委任状を預けたのは、私の誠意と事業の絶対の成功を疑わないからだ。
Have we seen, like, there supposedly is some, but have we seen any? So he spent all this money and nothing's developed.
ここで渋ったらどうなる？自分の事業に自分で自信が持てないことになるだろう。
You are a moron. Oh my god, this freaking guy. If you were such a successful businessman, we wouldn't be in debt right now, would we? Natsui only barely stopped herself from saying that.
お父様は亡くなりました。すると、あなたの借金が白日のもととなり、他の兄弟たちに咎められることになるわけですか？
それだけでは済まない。多分、刑事訴訟にも及ぶだろう。
刑事訴訟？
Yeah, that probably wouldn't be the worst thing for you, Natsui, if they just put him away.
どうしてですか？
You need to divorce this moron.
君は知らない方がいい。とにかく、絶対にこのことを誰にも知られてはならんのだ。
Krauss looked at the floor shamefully, shaking his head over and over. If it were to come to criminal charges, then he must have broken some laws. He's probably been so intent on raising a large sum of money that nothing can matter to him but survival. Krauss had seriously believed that he would succeed with several businesses and that he would definitely gain huge profits. So he had figured that even if he stepped over a few legal lines, he would be able to pay everything back before too long and pretend that the whole thing had never happened. Now, if this guy was like, if you don't have business acumen at all, which this guy does not, and you have old money in your family, you should be putting your money into index funds and like different things and not touching it. And you will make he would make way more money than even if one of these million business plans he's had worked, to be honest. This may have been the factor that lessened his resistance towards breaking a couple laws. And now Kizo's death, the worst possible thing had occurred, and they wouldn't be able to keep it all hidden for long.
私たちはどうなるのですか？
心配することはない。君は信じてくれんな。景気は今確実に上向いているんだ。私が都心で投資した不動産価値はみるみる上昇している。今それらを統合して巨大ビジネスタワーを建設する計画が進んでいる。これは私のこれまでの投資の中で最も確実で最も大きな成功をしているものだ。ただ、それは身をつけるのにまだ時間をかける。
Of course, because he comes up with no plans that are actually.
絶対に確実だが、今すぐというわけではないのだ。
その事業の成功は借金を返済するに足りるものですか？
もちろんだと思う。
Which means no.
これまでの借金をすべて帳消しにできる。
We'll see.
だから信じてくれ。もう少しだけ時間が欲しいんだ。
しかしお父様はもうお亡くなりになってしまいました。もうその時間はないのですよ。
わかっている。 分かっているとも。だからどこかから金を調達して今すぐに借金を返さなくてはならない。
She's gonna borrow money from a whole different person to pay off the Okay, you just...
とにかく金が必要なんだ。金が大量に今。
Homie needs to sell his body. That's what he needs. They need to make... He needs to go into the future, start an OnlyFans account, and then he can maybe pay back some of his debts if he gets super ripped. And yeah, that's about his only option. As she watched, several emotions swirled about in Natsui's chest. Her emotions conflicted as she felt pity for her husband while also feeling that he was a fool. And she felt a mixture of resentment and regret towards her own irresponsibility in letting her husband run wild for so long. Even if this day hadn't come, it should be clear that they were in a very critical situation, and yet he had carelessly waited for this moment to come, and was now writhing about. Her husband was so foolish and so pitiful. It would be easy to let herself get fed up with this. However, she was his wife. For a wife, ridiculing her husband as a fool would run in conflict with her responsibilities. If he was a fool, then she would have to support him enough to compensate. However, she didn't have a clue on what she should do. Since there had been such a massive amount of money within arm's reach, it was only natural that Krause would try to dip his hands into it. Alright, I'm going to stop here for this part, but I'm going to re-record, or record some more in a little bit later today. Oh my god. This guy is such an idiot. It would also be easy to tell him to be a man and give up on all of it. But that would also run in conflict with her responsibilities. She was Ushiromiya Natsui, the woman who had become Krause's wife and sworn to support him, the new head of the Ushiromiya family for her whole life. She had to somehow help her husband in his efforts to raise money. She understood it logically, but she couldn't suppress the indescribable dejection that seemed to rise up from the dark depths of her heart.
そうだ。親父の隠し黄金。10トンの黄金なら200億の価値がある。あれさえあれば。そうそう。あれさえ見つかれば万事は解決する。
That is true.
夏日、あれだ。魔女の碑文だ。あれを解こう。一緒に解こう。黄金さえ見つかれば万事解決なんだ。そうさ。この島のどこかに隠されてるはずなんだ。あれさえあれば。あれさえあれば。
一体。あなた。やめてください。
Krause acting as excited as if he thought up a perfect, brilliant plan, grasped Natsui's upper arms tightly. Natsui couldn't help but be dumbfounded. She just wasn't taken aback because she had heard him bring up something as fake-sounding as hidden gold. This was Krause, who usually mocked the story of the hidden gold. It's funny he mocks that, but then falls for every, trick in the book, saying that it didn't exist and it was an illusion his father had created to borrow a lot of money. That's why Natsui was doubly taken aback.
そうだ。ジェシカにも協力してもらおう。子供の感性でなら解けることもあるかもしれない。今は一家の一大事なんだ。みんなで協力し合わなくてはならない。そうだ。あんなの親父が作った気まぐれな謎なんだ。解けるはずさ。解けないはずがないんだ。
Well, we know where it is, technically.
それしかないんだ。ああ、夏日。本当によかった。まだ手は残っていたんだよ。こんなに身近に。この島に黄金はある。それさえあれば万事解決なんだ。
Homie is crazy.
夏日、ジェシカを呼ぶんだ。今すぐここに。家族の危機は家族で乗り越えよう。 さあ早く。黄金はこの島にある。すぐ身近にあるんだ。
What just happened? Unable to withstand the pain in the arm, he was twisting in his excitement. Natsui knocked Krause aside. Krause tripped over the edge of the bed and flopped over onto the floor.
いい加減にしてください。
Imagine if she actually killed him that
そ
way.
して
That'd
どう
be
か冷静になられてください。
hilarious.
後ろ宮家の一大事にそんな夢みたいなことを言い出してどうするというのですか。
夏日。
あなたもよく頭を冷やされて現実的な金策をお考えになってください。私も頭を冷やしてきます。
待ってくれ、夏日。
Maybe he had come to his senses in the instant he fell over. Krause tried to tell Natsui to stop, but she just kept walking. After closing the door forcefully, Natsui dashed away. Natsui ran through the corridor. Even though she didn't want anyone to see her like this, she ran headlong into Genji.
大変失礼いたしました。奥様、お怪我はございませんか？
私は大丈夫です。放っておきなさい。
かしこまりました。
源氏、お父様の書斎はどうなっていますか？
そのままにしております。南條先生は客間におられますが。
そうですか。書斎の鍵は持っていますか？
はい、ございます。
お貸しなさい。しばらく私とお父様の二人きり。もし主人に私のことを聞かれても知らないというのですよ。
かしこまりました。
Interesting. After grabbing the key to the study Genji was holding out to her, Natsui rushed up the stairs. She gonna hide the body? She flew into the study, finally let out a wail and cried.
"お父様、愚かな私たちを、私と主人はお父様の築き上げてきたものを受け継ぐ罪深く、愚かな私たちもどうかお許しください。
Dude, I like Natsui even though she's gonna kill everyone right here.
そして、もしお許しいただけるならば、どうか愚かな私たちを
She's honestly probably the most
お導きくだ
deserving
さい。
of the family's inheritance. Clinging to Kinzo as she slept in the bed, Natsui cried even harder. She kept imagining Kinzo sitting up suddenly and patting her head. No, father isn't the type of person to pay up her. More likely he'd yell at me to stop being so noisy. However, neither of those imaginations came true, because it was an undeniable fact that Kinzo had entered an internal sleep. But, even so, Natsui begged the sleeping Kinzo to forgive and help them. It was still only a few hours after his passing. Perhaps his soul was still there, listening to her. Believing this, Natsui begged for Kinzo's forgiveness and to help even more earnestly.
やかましいぞ。私は沈黙を尊ぶといつも言っている。
The voice made Natsui jump in surprise. Is it going to be his ghost? When she faced the direction that the voice had come from, she saw Kinzo sitting at the study desk, folding up his reading glasses.
またクラウスと喧嘩をしたのか。嫁をいたわらぬとはクラウスに私の悪いところばかりを受け継ぎよる。
お父様。
なんというみそぼらしい顔か。顔を洗え。仮にも後宮家次期当主の妻ではないか。そんな情けない面を使用人に見せてはならぬぞ。
はい、お父様。 しました。
Natsuie understood. This was just an illusion, one that Natsuie created out of her desire to speak with the memory of Kinzo as he once was. No, that wasn't it. She believed that just for now, Kinzo's soul had shown itself to her. She was sure that doubting this would cause it to vanish in an instant.
当主の座が継承されたと同時に早速厄介事が起きたようだな。
はい、お父さん、夫を支えることができませんでした。本当に。
Yeah, she blames herself. We all know it's really all Krause's fault for being a moron.
つくづく後宮家は呪われている。私が当主を継承した時もそれはひどいものだった。お前たちの苦難などまだまだ可愛いものだ。
Kinzo's succession to the family headship had come suddenly. At the time, he had been nothing more than a single young man from a branch of the family far separated from the Ushiromiya maid family. The maid family might have had an honor and tradition, but Kinzo had had nothing to do with that. Then, the principal members of the main family were wiped out in the Great Kanto earthquake, along with their businesses. On top of that, there had been a complicated antagonism between the members of the family at that time. And the elders had all tried to impose their will on others in that sinking ship. Because of this, they weren't able to elect a leader to revive the Ushiromiya family. They then found common ground and selected Kinzo, a youth with absolutely no ties to any of the opposing elders, to be the head. So the elders hadn't really entrusted Kinzo with the rebuilding of the Ushiromi family. Kinzo had been nothing more than their puppet, with his arms and legs pulled in opposite directions.
はい、お父様の苦難の日々はよく存じております。
そして戦争が始まった。当時の私はもう生きていくことに疲れ果てていた。戦場で死ねればと願ったが、前線には送られなかった。しかし、日に日に戦況が悪化し、本土決戦の時が近づいてきていた。私は不謹慎にも、その日が早くやってくることを願っていた。
After listening to the approaching footsteps of that Reaper day in and day out, it is said that Kinzo started cutting his ties with this world one by one. And then, on that day when he severed all his regrets, when he reached a state of enlightenment, it is said that he had a mystical experience. It is said that he met her, the Golden Witch Beatrice.
私は魔女と契約を交わし、黄金と狂気の力を与えられた。その日を境に、古き私は死に、狂気の魔力を得た新しき私が誕生したのだ。
存じております。そして戦後、お父様は天才的辣腕にて後宮家を復興させるのです。
The now deceased elders who knew Kinzo at the time had whispered to each other that Kinzo must have bumped his head on the battlefield and returned with a different personality. That was how much Kinzo had stood out after the war. Whether the story about Kinzo meeting a witch was true or not, there can be no doubt that the extraordinary experience of war had prepared him for death and let him reach a state of enlightenment. If he wanted to describe the mystical experience following all that as a meeting with a witch, that claim certainly shouldn't be dismissed out of hand.
そうですね。お父様は戦争魔女ベアトリーチェを従え、真の意味での後宮家当主となられたのです。
そうだ、ベアトリーチェに出会う以前の私は当主と呼ばれるだけの人。私は黄金の魔女を従えて初めて当主たり得たのだ。
お父様、その黄金の魔女は新しき当主であるクラウスには近
かすであろうな。真に当主を継承したならば。
真に継承するとはどういう意味ですか？
真の意味で後宮家の当主としての責任と誇りを持てるかどうかということだ。夏日、 お前ならば分かっているはず。当主とは血で継承されるものではない。魂と信念によって継承されるのだ。クラウスが我が長男であっても、それがなくては真の当主とは呼べない。そしてそれが心に宿されていたなら、その人間はたとえクラウスでなくとも、黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェはその真の当主に力を貸すである。そうであるな、ベアトリーチェ。
Is she gonna? When Kinzo called the witch's name, gold butterflies seethed out of every corner in the room. The fantastical scene had an otherworldly beauty to it. It was like standing in the midst of a blizzard of gold flower petals and being blown about the rose garden of gold. As Natsui stared at the scene in shock, the gold butterflies gathered and formed a human shape. Then, the witch of the portrait appeared.
いかにも。わらわこそが、後ろ宮家顧問錬金術師、黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェである。
See, now this is where I get kind of confused with some of this stuff, because we see, like, part of her consciousness is just like a vegetable that Battler saw, and she, like, couldn't talk, but she's, like, also here. But whatever.
わらわは奔放にして自由。誰の命令も聞かぬ。
それを世界でたった一人、私だけが支
That definitely
配
ain't
した。
true.
だからこそ後ろ宮家の当主たり得るのだ。
その傲慢さこそが後ろ宮家当主の資格だというか。
傲慢とはすなわち自信であり勇気である。そしてそれに見合う力を得ようとする飽なき向上心の表れである。だからこそ私はお前を支配した。
傲慢を語る男がそれを実現していく様を見るのは心地よいものだ。不言実行は強運なる者の言い訳に過ぎぬ。真の王者は持たぬ者さえも語る。そしてその傲慢を確かに実現してみせるのだ。わらわを支配できる者にはその王者の傲慢が必要だ。
わかるか、夏日よ。真の王者はあらゆる苦難を恐れぬ。必ず乗り越えられると公言する。その算段がなくともだ。だから弱者は希望を持つ。集い、あがめ、協力を誓う。そこに力が生まれ、有言は実行されるのだ。それを心に刻め。
はい、お父様。
Natsui understood. Through this mystical experience, Kinzo was telling her how to prepare herself to overcome hardship, even after his own death. Feeling a warm sensation rise up in her chest, she let the valuable words Kinzo had given her echo through her mind over and over. A true monarch. In other words, the true headship of the Ushiromiya family must not fear hardship. Such a person must believe that they can overcome any hardship. If they can't believe it about themselves, then they have no chance of overcoming their challenges. She suddenly felt very ashamed of the way she'd entered this room, sobbing and asking Kinzo what to do.
私はほら、後ろ宮家の一大事に泣き言を言う暇などあるわけもありません。そしてお父様から後ろ宮家を引き継いだ以上、私たちは何があってもその名誉を守り抜きます。ほう、どうやってクラウスの借金を返済するか、その青写真も描けぬのにか。
Beatrice laughed unpleasantly. No, that wasn't it. She was testing Natsui to see whether she possessed the mental readiness to be a true monarch. Natsui wasn't confused anymore. She answered clearly, gazing into Beatrice's eyes.
はい、今はどうすればいいのか、 その方法をまだ見つけることはできません。しかし私の夫は新しき後宮家の当主であり、ですから夫に代わり私が宣言します。
聞こ
う。後宮クラウスと夏日は必ずやこの苦難を乗り越え、後宮家の名誉を守ってみせます。お父様にご心配をおかけすることはありません。
クラウスの借金の規模と惨憺たる状況については知っておるな。
はい、この屋敷さえも明日には立ち退けと命じられても拒めぬという最悪の状況です。遺産分配となれば親族たちに刑事告発さえされるかもしれません。しかし心配には及びません。そうなる前に借金をすべて返済し、名誉を取り戻します。
As she stood at attention with resolute attitude, Natsui proclaimed this clearly, with Ushiromi, Kinzo, and Beatrice as witnesses. For a while, it remained silent, as though weighing Natsui's resolve. Then Kinzo chuckled and turned away.
よし、なぜにこやつが我が息子で
Yeah, he respects her so much more.
その資質を持つ女を息子がめとったことさえ、これもまたそなたの強運よ。
ベアトリ、私の最後の命令だ。
当主でないそなたの命令をもはや聞く義理はないぞ。
おう、ならば新しき後宮家当主の命令に従う。
そなたはすでに当主でなく、わらわは誰に仕えよというのか。
He's gonna say Natsui, huh?
お前にそれを委ねる。後宮家の当主を受け継ぐ資格があるかどうか、そして片翼のわしの紋章を背負うにふさわしいかどうか、お前が確かめるのだ。
断るぞ。当主でなき男の命令など聞けぬわ。
I love her.
いや違うぞ。これは遺言である。当主が残したお前への最後の命令である。
ならば従わぬわけにはいかぬか。わらわもつくづく付き合いがよい。
違うな。
ほう、
興味を持ったからであろうが。
つくづくそなたには隠し事ができんな。
夏日、
はい、お父様。
乗り越えてみよ、この苦難を。
はい。
This might have seemed like a mere response to Natsui, but to Kinzo and Beatrice it seemed as something much greater significance. Beatrice nodded deeply, and with a motion as elegant as her dress, she bowed deeply before Natsui.
後宮家顧問錬金術師、黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェ。後宮家の苦難を再び乗り越えるため、そなたの力となろうぞ。
ありがとう。あなたの力が必要です。私たちは必ずこの苦難を乗り越えます。
そのために助力は惜しまぬが、先に断らねばならぬ。かつて金蔵の窮地を救ったように、そなたに再び莫大な黄金を与えれば、この度のしかし、それはできぬのだ。
そうですか。
すまんな、夏日。ベアトリーチェの黄金は私一代限りという契約、そしてそれを受け継ぐためには魔女の碑文を解かねばならぬのが取り決め。
黄金は碑文にて封じられている。だからそれを解けぬ限り、そなたに黄金の魔法は与えられぬ。
わかりました。ならば他の方法でこの窮地を脱する方法を模
Or you
索
could
しま
solve
し
the
ょう。
epitaph.
主人は時間をかけるとは言っていますが、必ず借金は返済できると言っています。そのための時間を得ることができれば、この苦難は乗り越えられます。
Why would you trust anything he says?
よいぞ、夏日。続け。
しかし金蔵はもう死んでいるぞ。医者と使用人は葬儀の準備。 そなたは親族たちにその連絡だ。そなたは自らその金策の猶予時間を終わらせる宣言をすることになる。自ら刃を下ろす断頭台も愉快なものよ。
Startled, Natsui looked up at the ceiling. There wasn't actually anything there, but even so, Natsui had found something.
降りたか、魔力が。
夏日、決まったか。わらわに望む奇跡の魔法が。
Once again, all of those who had witnessed Kinzo's corpse were gathered in the study. Kraus was still impatient while clutching at his head. Genji was expressionless as ever. Nanjo and Kumasawa were more bewildered expressions on their faces. But in stark contrast to all of them, Natsui wore a resolute expression.
あなたにもう一度お尋ねします。金策は間違いないのですね。
1年。いや、せめて半年あれば、必ず実る計画なんだ。
It's quite a long time.
しかし、今すぐにはどうしても無理なのだ。
ならば、それを待ちましょう。
しかし、親父はもう、死んでしまった。
お父様はお亡くなりになどなっていません。まだこうして、ご健在であられます。
When Natsui said this, everyone jumped and looked up, because they insistently understood what those words meant. However, Kraus alone didn't get it right away and asked her.
それは、どういう意味だね。現にそこに。
繰り返します。お父様は未だに、ご自身の研究がお忙しいので、これまで以上に書斎を出ることはできません。ですから私たちは、お父様が研究に専念できるように、お父様に不要なお仕事が及ばないようにしなくてはなりません。つまりそれは、これまでと何ら変わらないということ。
Is this like significantly long before the
理
family
解できて
conference?
いますね。
はい。
片翼のわしの家具は、これからも親方様にお仕えいたします。
熊沢、そして南條先生、私の話は理解できましたね。
それでいいのかね、夏日さん。
お父様は確かに今日お亡くなりになったかもしれません。しかし、今この場にいる私たち全員が信じることで、お父様を蘇らせる魔法を使うことができます。
無理ですよ、奥さん。そんな、いくらなんでも。
解剖すれば死亡時期を特定される。不審がられることは避けられん。
お父様はお亡くなりにならないのですから、解剖などされる言われはありませんよ。
Of course she wasn't planning on making it seem like Kinzo would live forever. The fake life given to Kinzo would only last until Kraus could repay his debts. After that, Kinzo's soul would finally be able to rest in peace. Nanjo repeatedly said that the time of death would be discovered during the autopsy, but Natsui said that this wouldn't be a problem.
お父様は死亡届によってお亡くなりになるのではありません。
そうか。失踪届か。
After clapping his hands together, Kraus stood up, shaking his fist.
そうです。借金が無事に返済でき、お父様にお休みいただける準備が整ったなら、その時にお父様の失踪を宣言します。
Rokujima's vast, uncultivated forest was the perfect place to stage a disappearance. One day, Kinzo would go out to the forest and walk and never return. They would search for him without success and be forced to report his disappearance.
失踪なら、死体がなくても死亡届を出せる。つまり、死亡時期を隠せるということだ。どうだ、南條先生。これなら何の問題もない。
Interesting.
確かに、そういうことにはなりますが。
それで良いのですか、奥様。
Of course it's okay. What?
確かに私たちが黙っていれば、親方様がお亡くなりになられたのは秘密ですが、どこでどう間違って誰かに知られないとも。
熊沢、声が大きいです。お父様はあちらでお休み中なのですよ。起こしてしまわれるつもりですか？
They just do like weekend at Bernie's with him. It isn't a corpse. Ginzo is sleeping. As Natsui said that, Ginzo lay quietly on the bed as though there was nothing at all odd about her words.
"さあさあ思い出してごらんな。そなたがどんな姿をしていて、そなたがどんな日々を謳歌していたのか。
Once again, a storm of gold butterflies started to swirl, covering Ginzo's cold body. Then, after the butterflies exploded into fine gold powder and disappeared, just like those fairy tales that have been told over and over since long ago, Ginzo opened his eyes and sat up.
お父様。
夏日、先に我が名誉のために断っておくぞ。私は生への執着からそなたにこれをそそのかしたのではない。
嘘つき、多少は予見していたであろうが。どうだ金蔵、体の方は。
悪くはないが、どこか夢の中のような感じだ。重みがないな。
この世にとどまることを許されぬ存在が未だとどまっているのだ。多少の不自由は諦めよ。
お体は本当に大丈夫なのですか？本当に大丈夫なのですか？
むしろ心地よいくらいだ。これが死後の世界の感覚ならば、幽霊気取りも捨てたものではないぞ。
これにてどうか、夏日。金蔵はよみがえった。故に葬儀は不要。そなたの苦難はこれにて解決だ。
ベアトリーチェ。
There's no way dumbass Kraus gets the stuff in 6 months, though. As Natsui tried to find words of gratitude amidst her confusion, Beatrice wagged her pointer finger and spoke.
感謝の言葉はいらぬぞ。支配者は傲慢であればよい。わらわは頼みは聞かぬが、命令には従うのでな。
それでも言います。ありがとう。これで主人のために時間が稼げます。
That guy's all-star moron.
あとは私たちの仕事です。
しかし夏日、心確かに金蔵は蘇ったが、それは永遠ではない。我が魔力が続く限りである。反魔法の毒素により、魔法は破られてしまうかもしれぬことを心せよ。魔法の断りを正しく理解し、そのわらわはそなたに奇跡を見せるが、それをつかみ、とどめるのは、そなたの役目だ。
無論です。あなたにもらったこの奇跡を、私たちは決しておろそかにしません。
それでよい。なるほどな。主と畳は新しい方がいいというのは本当です。
Such a weird way to describe it, but
気に入った。わらわはそなたに仕えようぞ。後ろ宮夏日。我こそは後ろ宮家顧問錬金術師、黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェ。いつでも我が名を呼ぶがいい。さすれば現れ、わらわはそなたに奇跡を授けるであろう。
ありがとう。私は後宮夏日。あなたを刺激し、後宮家の名誉を守ります。
Oh, okay. I'm gonna stop here because this is a flashback and um, I feel like this is actually like a really good place to stop. But yeah, I mean, this is. I'm really liking this episode a lot. It's interesting seeing Kraus has been dead, gets basically revived, or I don't know. That's how we're being shown it. There's a lot of different ways we can look at this, though. But yeah, I'm excited to see what kind of happens, especially in this flashback, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of kind of crazy things that we're going to learn about some of the family members, excluding Battler because he was not at this conference. So yeah, and but yeah, guys, let me know what you thought about the episode. I think this is pretty awesome so far, and we haven't seen the new character again yet. So yeah, curious of what's about to happen. Thanks.